flying game saved for the team.
The game is yours to play now.
The light provides.
This is Eventide Radio.
Hello and welcome back to Eventide Radio. This is a fan-made Destiny podcast where we have roundtable discussions about a variety of different topics concerning the popular video game franchise. At its core, the show is about having in-depth discussions about the game from a variety of different perspectives. I'm your host Scotty, with me are my co-hosts Rob and Mapdor, and today we're going to be diving into Revenant Act 1, because that came out the other week and dropped pretty much all the Act 1 content straight away, a little different from the previous episode. So we've got a lot to talk about in that sense, and Destiny Rising dropped its first announcement trailer, so we can also touch on that interesting subject. But as usual, before we get into the meat and potatoes of everything, Rob, what have you been up to this week in Destiny?
What have I? No, for the last day or two, I have been getting caught up on stuff. We'll kind of talk about it as we talk about our thoughts on the opening of the act. This is probably the least I've played of Destiny and like a big content drop, probably like ever. I'm like, we'll get into it later, but I'm like not super interested in anything right now. But I did want to play the dungeon, so I did that the other week, and then I went out of town for a few days, and so I got back and wanted to kind of catch up on like the week 2 like stuff. So like doing like the field work and things like that. So I've been chugging along in the season. Did a couple rounds of Onslaught and whatnot, but definitely not nearly as much as like any other season in the past where it was like, oh, I got to do all my pinnacles this week. Like I haven't touched pinnacles or like anything. So, but I've been playing just with a different mindset.
Sure. Yeah, we'll get into that. It's definitely a bit of a different content drop. Map, I know you have been afflicted with an illness. What have you been up to this week?
I was actually playing some fair amount of PvP on my Hunter for a change. I ran into a bug. I don't know if it's just a one-off. It just happened and I was bungeed. I haven't seen anyone mention it. I got hit with a smoke nade and the effect didn't leave me. My screen just went permanently smoked and I just died from full health. Went from full to dying by a smoke nade.
Oh, so it kept like ticking your health until you died?
Yeah, it was not good.
Wow.
I've never run into anything like that before.
Weird.
Yeah. I have saved the clip, but I don't know if that was a one-off or if their smoke nades are bugged or something. But and then I remembered that Dragon Shadow only has one ornament and we need another. But yeah, I've mostly been doing that. I've done the new dungeon. I've played a bit of Onslaught. The Cabal drop pods can go fuck themselves.
Yep. As always.
No, I don't mind them in other content. It's just in Onslaught they are annoying. But yeah, I literally have made the tonics that were required for the quest and have not made them since. I don't even remember what they do. The story has intrigued me more than it did last season. I'm interested just to see what happens with Mithrax and his illness as well. But yeah, I've mainly been doing some PvP and odd bits and bobs here and there.
So that's a good segue into our first topic. Let's talk about Act 1's story, considering they just dropped the whole thing already. I assume you guys have played through the whole thing, correct?
Yeah.
Because it takes about not much time to get through that.
Yeah.
It was very funny when Bungie announced like you can just skip it all, and they're taking out all the filler in between steps for the the weekly story, and then people were like, I've done it in 2 hours, and it's like, that's what they said they were going to do. You could do that. And they're like, well, what do I do now? Well, I don't understand how people... All right, there can be different sets of people complaining about issues and not, there'd be no crossover. But it seems to be like the community at large doesn't know what they want sometimes with the seasonal stories.
Yeah. No, not that, and that's very evident with this, where, they did the one thing that people wanted.
They took out the filler.
I'm tired of this time gating. You know, it's funny. I don't mind the filler, I think if they had left a few more, like, it would have been weird to go do this and then do a 10-wave onslaught and then go do another thing and then another 10-wave onslaught. Like, the pacing would have been off.
Yeah.
But I think that therein lies the, like, problem of, and that's, I think, what shows its ugly head of, that's all they have for, like, filler. Like, they didn't even have, like, little interim missions of, like at least last season, right? They had kind of like the Nessus stuff where you to go explore some areas, and like this had like nothing, which I think was the problem.
I mean, there are pros and cons for both. Like the Nessus quest things that you had to do, like go and I forgot what they were called now. It was like a number next to it for last episo's side
like
quest
the
things.
Specimen things.
Yeah, the specimen.
Oh,
I literally didn't do those unless they were required for the main quest.
Neither did I.
But they've cut that stuff out. Like I don't really have an opinion either way. I'm just going to do the main stuff and then maybe do the sides, like story stuff for the weekly story. But
they have the field work in replacement of that, which are incredibly like underwhelming, and I cannot help but point out, like, this is probably the single-handed like weirdest part, and I'm just gonna be very blunt about it. The major field work is the dumbest thing I think they've ever done, where you like go to, like, so you do the minor field works, which are like, okay, you find a little item trinket and there's like a map, and it like there's like a clue where it's like, oh, it's hidden under this big tree out in the middle of nowhere, and it's like, okay, I had to use my brain for all of half of a second to figure out where it was. I'm okay with that though. Like it's interesting at least. And there's some like, oh, finish enemies in this location. Like, okay, that's fine. I don't mind doing that kind of stuff. But then you have the major field work where it's like you find a crafting table that's just on the EDZ, for example, and then you experiment, and then it just loads in and you kill 15 enemies in like 2 minutes. And it's the most bizarre, jarring, like...
I had one that was get precision kills in this area, right? And most of the enemy spawning were shanks, and I was infuriated.
Well, that's fine. The minor field works are somewhat engaging, but the major field works are like, what is that? Like, why even have those in there? You don't do anything. You like the timer. It's not like a really tight timer. It's not like this weird, interesting where you're fighting like tough enemies. It's just like a bunch of like red bars, and then there's one yellow bar at the end. But it's like, why are those in there? Like, it feels like that was like a stopgap, like they were intending on doing something else, and then they just like forgot or ran out of time. Like, it's the dumbest, weirdest, most non-interesting thing I think they've ever done as part of like a seasonal thing. Like, why are those in there? They're worthless.
Yeah. No, I get that. I guess it's just something to do.
I guess, but like, why are they the major field work? Like, it genuinely
would
feels
get like a mini mission or something for a major field work kind of thing, you know?
I guess, but it's like they're completely worthless. Like, you get some materials, like they're rewarding, but it's like the most like brain dead, unthought out.
I mean, all right, I'll cut them some slack. I think at the start of the season, at least, because we haven't got the next two activities that come out in Act 2 and Act 3.
Sure.
It seems like from the offset that's all you get. Obviously, you get on the Onslaught update as well. But yeah, I think they should have maybe released... All right, kind of spoilers, but kind of not, because we know what the name of it is. Was it Tomb of the Elders?
Yeah, so
maybe that should have come first with the major and minor field works, and then the Onslaught rework happen in Act 2. I get for story reasons it probably doesn't work,
right? But
then we have something very, I'll say new, but something cool to look at, and then we get the Onslaught update, which is still cool. But at the minute, what we've got is an Onslaught update, which some people can't be bothered to do, which I get. And I agree. I keep seeing people say the 10 waves is too short, but the 50 waves is too long, and I agree with that. There needs to be an in between.
30. Yeah.
Yeah. Or just increase the 10 1 to 15. Or have a 30. So at the minute, all it seems like for the season we're getting is an Onslaught update and go here to this workbench that someone randomly put up in the middle of nowhere.
Right. And but it's like, again, it feels weird because, right, when you activate the bench, it's like experiment with a tonic. So it's like, was there supposed to be like something on your screen that like trips you out, like where you're drugging out and then you have to kill 15 enemies all disoriented? Like, if they did that and like they did something funny where it's like your controller was inverted or
that'd be so fun.
The joke thing that you do when you test the tonic in the last
scene, and you turn into a frog or something. Yeah,
you turn into Colonel, and then you have to just run around. I don't know if they'd be able to move while doing that, but
that's why it just feels like it's incomplete. Like they meant to do something more, and they like ran out of time or forgot, or they just like, this is fine. And it's like it's so weird. It's just kill 15 enemies in 2 minutes, and they just kind of spawn around you.
It's just a patrol.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a patrol. But why is it called major field work when the minor field works are like you have to like do a certain thing and then find a hidden object? Like that's way more engaging and at least kind of akin to the specimen samples. Which, by the way, the specimen samples are mostly kind of silly, but, everyone talks about Captain Jacobs. No one ever talked about the pterodactyls at the end, which I thought were way more adorable and fun. But, like, I think because no one did them, because everyone was kind of just checked out. Like, I
mean, personally, I don't know what you're talking about, because I never did that.
Yeah, so it's like...
perfect example.
The last specimen example, which is, like, you find in the exotic mission, it's a pair of, like, pterodactyls, and you make, like, a little... like stand for them next to Captain Jacob.
You make a little family.
Yeah, and they're adorable. And I'm sure they have some quirky name, I don't remember, but it was like no one... That's the other thing too, is they're kind of stretching certain things out way too long. And I completely agree with you, Map, that like the
pterodactyls are called Silent and then Mr. T.
But no, it would have been nice to get this quote unquote Challenge of the Elders, Prison of Elders, revisited activity. It would be so cool to have gotten that at the beginning. I kind of get the feeling that like seeing how this came out, like maybe they're not ready for it and they need another month to like polish it. Like that's what it kind of feels like to me, is that that like if it came out now, it would have been.
I'm looking forward to Tomb of the Elders. Like but that's
I am excited about that.
That's because I played Prison of Elders.
Right.
But, if you don't, then I guess you don't, unless you're, like, intrigued at all.
Right.
Though we don't know how it's going to work differently. I'm guessing it's new bosses and things, since they've got D. Bradley in to do Varix for this season, so I'm guessing he recorded new voice lines.
I hope so. That would be super cool. I've always liked...
If he's not, that would be really weird, because he's
it'd be a complete...
Like he's like Varix is in this season. He's spoken, so
right.
But yeah, I don't.
It was such a pleasant surprise to see Varix and actually have D. Bradley Baker there. Personally,
yeah, and have him actually talk to Mithrax, which was like a neat. Like, I don't think even in Beyond Light that happened or anything of that nature. So that was kind of a cool.
No, they haven't interacted with our, they have, but like not for us to see, and listen to.
Exactly. Seeing them in the room together is
yeah. He was consoling Mithrax with insect-like chatter.
I think the story elements are kind of neat. I do think having them trimmed the fat and having it all come out at once really kind of shows how much they rely on just run an onslaught, the busy work. And
I'm glad they've cut it out, because I think what was happening before was I'd come on, it'd feel like a drag, and then I'd be less motivated to do other things. But then as soon as I'd done it, I was like, oh, I actually feel like playing the game.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a blessing and a curse. Ultimately, I think having it in there allowing people to do it whenever they want is ultimately a good choice, because it's like you can get it all done with the first night if you want to, and then you're done with it. And otherwise, or if you want to stretch it out and take your time, you can also do that.
People also have got to remember that, like, yes, you can do it very quickly, but no, that is not the whole season done in one day. Calm down. There is other stuff. There's an exotic quest. There's a obviously we've got the dungeon. There's the Tomb of the Elders. You know, like it's not like the first act of the episode is that's it. You've that's what you paid for. There's other things.
Yeah, I hope though that we don't get the exotic mission until the final act. And I believe. Yeah, that's what's happening. I think so too. But it was so poorly done with Encore, where it was like no one wanted to do it, and I had to like force a couple people in my clan just to like run through it a couple of times. And it's like, this should not be like that. Going back to kind of your initial statement, it would have been cool if maybe at some point, like during this act, part of the mission dropped, so you can at least kind of like play it and maybe like just unlock the exotic, and then like as the act goes on, or as the season goes on, then you can unlock like the catalyst and the enhancements for it. But like,
sort of like what they do with the season pass exotic as well.
Yeah, I like exactly kind of pace it out like that. I would much rather do that rather than force myself to just run Encore a bunch of times right at the very end. And it's like, it's just like the pacing of it is just off, and I don't. But that being said, I am excited for whatever this Prison of Elders, revisited is when in next act. Like I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what it will be.
I don't know if I'm in the minority or not when I say that I think the dropping the story content all at once, I really like, and I like that they've removed all the filler stuff. I found myself much more invested in the story when it can all move at like a normal pace instead of getting like fractions of a story, like piece by piece, week by week. I much prefer just having the whole act. It feels like an actual proper, for lack of a better word, like episode of a TV show than just the week by week stuff. So I like it. I think it's cool. It was pretty short, admittedly, and I'm a little disappointed with the final mission of the act. I thought could have been way cooler. Because it was called, I believe the title of the mission was called like Something Left to Say, which is, of course, a reference to Nothing Left to Say, which was the final mission of Forsaken, which was awesome. And so I was like, oh shit, this is going to be crazy. Stuff's going to hit the fan here. And that mission is like 5-10 minutes long, and 90% of it is just like a conversation between Aldrin and Pickrell, and it's like, okay. My other critique of the story right now is just the whole dynamic between Pickrell and Aldrin, with like Pickrell kind of like idolizing him, or idolizing the past version of him, and expecting him to react a certain way, and then realizing that his idol doesn't react the way he expected. Feels a little cliche, because I feel like we've seen that trope quite a bit in fictional media these days. So it feels a little played out, in my opinion, but I'm curious to see where it goes. We'll see. How do you feel about the whole like concept of the echoes being like kind of like this MacGuffin thing that they're gonna keep doing? I assume.
It's an interesting question. I'm okay with it. I thought it was kind of an interesting, like, I mean, you're never going to get, I know we've kind of talked about this in many different like capacities, but it's like, you're never going to get some like profound narrative for like a game like this, where you need to have a keep reason to like slay out on monsters. And it was like, okay, as soon as the witness died, we all kind of assumed, well, there's going to be a power vacuum. And like literally Aldrin said that in like that kind of like end credits, like post campaign thing, where you see the echoes like split off and go. And it's like, all right, well, he said the thing where it's like, of course there's going to be some reason that like otherwise everything's just going to kind of cower in fear. And so like having a MacGuffin item kind of like exist because it is a remnant or a result of the fight between the light and dark kind of seems like an organic, like, I'm okay with it. Like, yeah, it's cliche, but it's also like, if something like that didn't happen, it's like, what would be the driving motivation for like anything really? So it's like, yeah, I'm okay that it's in there. Could they have written it better? Sure. Is it also like, I now, because we know that like the season after this, the Heresy one, where we're going to go back to the Dreadnought, then presumably maybe we're going to drive that or fly it out of the solar system. Like, that's a more exciting prospect, and I feel like that's kind of a neat storytelling device where it's like we're commandeering this like derelict vessel and kind of taking the fight out of our system. Like, that's exciting and an interesting like storytelling device. I'm okay with this kind of like, I still go back to, we've had so many expansions where like the seasons kind of just happen and there's no like explanation and there's no linking it directly back to like the expansion that we played. Like, I know Lightfall tried to do that and they were moderately successful, whereas like Witch Queen didn't even make any sense, and like the Beyond Light, like nothing was related, right? It's just like a thing happens and now that's what we're doing for 3 months. This actually at least feels like here is a direct result of the expansion, and here's kind of the fallout of us defeating the Witness. So I'm at least glad that there's a cohesive like throughput with the 3 seasons that we're getting kind of post expansion that are at least somewhat related and have something to do with the ramifications of that. Whereas like Witch Queen, like you would think, I was hoping with Witch Queen, for example, each of those seasons was going to have something to do with, well, now that these light-bearing hive exist, how is that going to like affect the solar system? We didn't really see that, and that was like, well, then like there's no tying it back to like the expansion. Lightfall at least kind of tried to, where it's like, now that we have the veil and we want to understand it more, we're seeking out this space whale on Titan to understand it better. Like there's a little bit there, right? You know, and so like I'm happy that it's at least related to the expansion, and it feels like kind of a natural progression of, you know, that's I agree. It's a little cliche, but at least it feels like it's a little more of a throughput for the next year of story.
I agree that there needs to be that connection, that throughput throughout all the seasons, and actually have a like a longer lasting plot thread, something that actually has an impact on the rest of the story, as opposed to just these random one-off things like the endless night in Season of the Splicer, for example.
I think they tried it, but it doesn't work because
I don't think so. Yeah,
because you've got, well, though the endless night thing didn't have anything to do with Witch Queen, which followed, what was going on with some of the characters does. And then you start the season and you're like, oh shit, this is happening. And then you have to have a cutscene play that describes the last few seasons because people might not have been there. Like Osiris being Savathun. Like, that was a whole through line from the start of the seasons that year of Season of the Hunt. Yeah, Season of the Hunt. Chosen. And then I've forgotten the last one.
Yeah, but like Season of the Chosen could have happened at any time.
Oh yeah, but what I mean is you have to, at the start of the expansion they have a cutscene going, oh, Savathun was Osiris, they did this, and it's like they had, you know, it had impact. I know that obviously those seasons didn't like have anything to do with the thing before, you know, Beyond Light, but I think they're going to have to move away from that because it's so... I know they're going to tell a continuous story again, but the way they do it, I don't know, because I had to sit... Someone started playing the game again, and the last time they played was Forsaken. And I had to basically give them homework, which was, go watch this cutscene, go watch this, go watch this. Right, now that you've done that, you can watch this cutscene.
Right.
And it's like, They just want to play the game. They don't like the story, but they kind of just want to play it. They don't want to sit there and watch like 5 different archival videos on the, Destiny YouTube because they're gone.
Yeah.
I mean, that comes just with rotating seasons, but...
Yeah. Those timeline missions, though, are kind of half decent because they do give at least the major plot points.
But they're not... They're like timeline missions for DLC. They're not really for seasons.
Sure.
And that's the problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, like... it would be jarring for anybody who last played Forsaken to now see that the Cabal and the Fallen are our allies and kind of Savathun, right? Like that's super jarring, and it's like that it's going to happen with 7 years of
Crow, right? If you played Forsaken and then you come back now,
and he's the Hunter Vanguard,
other than obviously the final shape where that gets explained. Him being a Guardian, that is not in the timeline missions. I believe, actually, he gets... I could be wrong, but I think you see him get revived
at the
end of...
cutscene.
At the end... I know, but I think you see him get revived at the end of the timeline mission for Forsaken.
I think so.
Okay. But the other stuff, I don't believe is there. So, like, him joining the Vanguard, essentially, that sort of thing.
Right.
Finding out that he was Crow, Aldrin, and things like that. That's not there. So, I don't know.
Right, because we had the whole, like, all of the Hawkmoon mission stuff.
Yeah.
And, like, it's ultimately, though, like... like, yeah, I understand, but, like, your friend maybe being, like, frustrated, but it's also, like, yeah, you skipped 5 years of story missions and seasons.
I mean,
like that's
more
kind
in the
on
sense
you.
of getting people to play the game, like just new people. I mean, like that's why I think having what does Fortnite do? I know that they have seasons and they have chapters or whatever, but what I know there's a quote unquote story to that apparently from some from what people say. What is there a continuous story for that from season over season?
That you cannot. That game has Master Chief and Spider-Man in the same arena.
I know. But it like I get why they don't have like a continuous story in that sense over season. Right. I get why it's not that linked.
Yeah,
and it's more like Monster of the Week sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the solution is, short of like literally having all seasonal content also in the game, where it's like,
can you imagine how much content there would be if every single seasonal content?
It would be hundreds of gigs. Like
it would be fucking insane.
Yeah, and I'm really gonna
go do one of those hunts from Season of the Hunt.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. No, we've come so far, and it's like there's a certain like burden on the player that if you're entering the game now and like I don't know, if I started playing Warframe right now, I would assume that I would need to do a little bit of legwork to understand the context of like the newest expansion or story thing. Like I would,
though I think the Warframe story is interesting in some places and very bland in others. The story is all there.
Is it like all of it?
Yes.
How big is that game then?
It's how they do the story is very weird. It's like Destiny, how there's like lore and things like that, and it's just quests. And then there's like a few big quests that have big and large implications that are very story heavy, and then the rest of it is not. But yeah, they don't have seasonal story like that. Every so often they have an update, and there's like a small story, like a season in Destiny, but it's a very short quest, and that's sort of it. But it stays in the game.
Yeah.
To be fair, most of the places like it's I mean, some of it, a lot of it is generated, like the tile spaces and things like that. procedurally generated, but there's not really new environments.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like it's the seasonal structure is a problem, and it's also something that like. So I've also been playing a lot of Diablo 4 recently because the expansion for that came out, Vessel of Hatred, which is...
I do want to pick it up at some point.
It's... The story itself is pretty awful.
I wasn't really playing... I haven't played... Like, I really enjoyed Diablo 3, but I don't remember a thing about that story at all.
Exactly.
Like, genuinely.
The vanilla campaign for Diablo 4 is pretty good. There's some great cutscenes. There's some decent cutscenes.
I haven't played any of Diablo 4 at all.
Yeah,
so.
but they have kind of the seasonal problem where, like, Season 2, for example, was this, like, Season of the Blood or something like that. It's all vampire themed, and so you had all these, like, vampire powers, and you had this, like, totem thing that you, like, upgraded, and part of your builds went into, like, all of these. And then it goes away, and when your seasonal character gets converted to the Eternal Realm, anything that was part of that is, like, lost. And so it's kind of this, like, ultimately the season stories are a lot more thin in terms of like relating it back to like the actual campaign or the main story. That being said, like last season was Season of the Infernal Hordes, and that kind of had something to do with the vanilla story, which I think was kind of like a segue into Vessel of Hatred. But anyway, like it's definitely like lost on people, and there's no way to go back and like play those. And that has even less in terms of like cutscenes to explain like why you killed vampires or why one of Diablo's sons embodied a robot that was down in this vault that was built by Zoltan Kuhl. Like
that sounds so random.
Yeah, it's pretty random, but it like means something to somebody. But it's ultimately all of that lore is like lost because it's like the seasons are gone now. And yeah, if you want to watch the cool like animated cutscenes,
I'd say in some ways that's worse.
Yeah.
Because in Diablo you make a character for the season, or you can, and then it goes away at the end of the season. Well, but you keep the stuff.
It doesn't go away. It gets converted to what's called the Eternal Realm, where all the gear that you unlocked or all the gear that you have, everything that your character's level, all the skills and everything just goes to the Eternal Realm, where all of your other Eternal characters like are collectively like all of your resources, so your gold slowly just kind of stacks up to some ungodly amount there because
I remember people were saying like if Destiny did something like that, like at the start of every season or episode or whatever, you made a character that was for that and you gained gear, and then while that season's going on, you can only, like in the seasonal stuff anyway, you can only use the stuff you've earned that season.
Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at this point in terms of like talking about like what's a huge. I think we talked about it in one of our podcasts. Is I was kind of proposing that as like a potential like way to change things up is like every season. So and what they did in Diablo 3 is you could reborn your character. So every time you had a new season, you would just your character would start fresh level 1, but it would be the character that you had last season, like their name carries over. And there's I think like a little counter of how many times, like every season that you've reset that character. It's kind of like a badge of honor. I would totally be willing and like to hear out something like that.
But then you could still go back on your main character and do normal raids.
Yeah, you could go back to the Eternal Realm. And all of your stuff is there.
I mean, maybe they could try something like. I mean, if they're willing to experiment, like they said they are with Apollo, maybe they will try something like that at some point as a one-off. Like, though I have no clue how that would work in Destiny, because obviously, the free character limit and things like that.
Yeah, and that's, I think that in the vault size, right, those are huge, like, limitations of...
Yeah.
But yeah, it'd be kind of this interesting...
It would be cool to have a PvP playlist that's just stuff from that season.
Right.
It doesn't have to be armor, it could just be weapons, like...
Yeah. Think about it. Think about it literally like the transition from Destiny 1 to Destiny 2, right? Where it's like you're the character that you made, what they look like, all of that transfers over, but you're starting fresh, level 1. Like I would almost be okay with that, like because I know people kind of hate the power level grind and all of that, but like that's such like a core element to RPG games of like this like sense of progression where you start off squishy and then you like build into a certain like character like element and do all these things, and then by the end of the season you're like OP, and that's like just the right amount of time to like start fresh all over again. Like I feel like in this you get like the one or two things that you want in the first week, and then you're kind of just like done, or you hit the pinnacle cap in that first like day or two, and then you're done, and there's no like, I don't know. I like seeing a level number go up. I maybe that's like an old school thing, but it like works really well in Diablo. Like you start level 1, there's that now it used to be 1 to 100, but now it's 1 to 60, and then you have your Paragon grind, which takes you all season to do, and it's like a fun just kind of like sense of some kind of progression. Like every time you play, that number goes up a little bit more, and you earn these cool weapons, and we were actually talking about it the other night because we were playing some Diablo 4 of like, you know, I think maybe Destiny needs to adopt this model of like every season have a couple of broken builds that are just like, let everyone play it for that season, let it be totally busted, and then at the end of the season you kind of bring it back down, and then let something else come out and be like super nutty, right? There's a new exotic that comes out that just makes this build like absurdly kind of broken, but it's only broken for that season. Like Diablo kind of does that, where it's like, something will come out that's like clearly more weighted towards the other. And I'm not talking about the Spiritborn and Vessel of Hatred, which is like a whole other balancing thing, but like every once in a while, like a new unique will come out that just completely changes like the paradigm of how you play a certain character type that's like was not a thing before, and it's only there for really that season, and then the next season they kind of they nerf that exotic, or they kind of change it and bring it back down with everything else.
I think doing that would just, I think that would just piss people off. Mainly in the Destiny community, I'd see like.
And I understand there's the PvP aspect that needs to be.
I don't mean just that. Even in PvE, that's where I mostly see people complaining about nerfs.
I guess it's like it's because Diablo's always kind of had that like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering what the like. I hate talking about it in some ways, but I hate like. But we have to. Like, what would be the monetization? How would it make a difference? Like, how much money do they make from the season? And would that increase people playing it if they had to do that? Because, you know, people hate the fucking power grind that they did. You know, it's 10 plus power.
Yeah, which is a whole other thing. And so, yeah.
I mean, I don't mind about that, but you've got people who would see that very negatively, the character reset in a way sort of thing. Maybe if they just made it where certain activities you had to use the new weapons in, and they were balanced around that.
Yeah, I don't think I feel like there's not enough new weapons to like justify that, and that's kind of one of the other problems.
Yeah, but that's fine. But you're kind of forced to use certain weapons with the season anyway because of like the champion mods in certain content anyway. So you might as well, I think, just at least try it, like one activity where it's like, oh, you have to use the seasonal weapons. So you've got the pulse rifle, you've got the sniper, you've got the shotgun, things like that. I get, obviously, they time gate the weapons at the minute, so not all the weapons are out. So at the start of the season, it would be even harder. But yeah, I think they should experiment and try that.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, I'm not advocating for a nerf because don't. Why would be the point? But I've used Sunshot. Other than if there's a specific exotic, I've just used Sunshot in PvE for forever.
Right
now, or Zyla's Bane. It's like I'm not going to use anything else really.
Yeah, but if you use it for that season, and then something else comes along that's more enticing and more intriguing, like if it changes up the gameplay style enough, like
that's power creep at the end of the day, really, and then you just nerf it, and then but then people would be like, "What's the point?" And I think that's where like people would fatigue very quickly with that.
But it's so much better than like this stagnant where it's like builds haven't changed much, like almost at all. Like every once in a while they might slightly like it. What's the Titan exotic? The one where you can like turn. Like the one where it's a stasis one where you Icefall Mantle, right? Where it's where it used to be really buggy, or not buggy, but just kind of crappy, where it's like you're slow moving and you just have this overshield. But now it's like it kind of gives like Banner of War to like Stasis Titans. Like that's a cool thing, and it's like totally different, changes the style up, and just gives people an opportunity to play Stasis Titan that they haven't for a while. If they make it interesting and strong enough and viable in enough endgame content, I think people just need to not be afraid to like change things up. Like, and
all right. Me using Sunshot loads is my choice. Like, I'm not being forced to use it. I am actively choosing to use that weapon. I mean, I'm more so enjoy PvP than PvE, unless it's like raids and stuff like that. But I think that if you had something where you had to use a certain gun in some activity, not everything, because that's too much. Just one activity a season, that would be at least interesting.
Yeah, if they make them interesting enough to want to break away from, and I think that's like
because then I think it would help people find guns that they'd want to use as well.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. They have to do something, because right now it's like this. There's a new warlock chest piece that came out. I've got it up here. The Rhymecoat Raiment, which gives like Bleak Watchers this really cool, like, it creates this like it makes them super like proactive and more aggressive. They do more damage. You get those like ice shards around it that you can, or stasis shards that you can shatter and do all these kind of fun nutty things with, and that's really, really cool. But it's also like you're still just doing a Bleak Watcher build where it's like do something like way more drastically different. Like I don't know. I'm blanking on an idea, but they're not really pushing the needle in one way or the other, and they're not really doing anything that entices me. Whereas like every season of Diablo, I have done a completely different build, and most of the time that's on Necromancer. But Necromancers have gotten so many, and this is the case for all classes, but Necromancers have gotten some really interesting tech each season that like forces a completely different playstyle that like makes things really interesting, and it doesn't feel like I'm playing the same Necromancer that I was last season. Whereas this, I still feel like I'm playing a Warlock where I'm throwing ice turrets out, and it's like, why is that? Like, and certainly last season when they came out with prismatic, like that was really cool and really neat. And I'm not saying every season needs to have a prismatic equivalent of like build, but like maybe that's a good example. They didn't add any new fragments or aspects to prismatic. Like that was kind of the unfortunate thing, where it's like I really wish that they had kind of like kept expanding on that and made things more things interesting with that, and we still haven't gotten anything. And it's like that would be a great like sandbox to play around with new build ideas, and instead it's like it's also like weird things where like they made trip mine grenades better for hunters again with young Car Spine, which is like one of my favorite exotics.
That was very good that they've like separated the two thing effects from PvP and PvE.
Great they separated that, but then it's like, okay, but trip mines aren't available on prismatic, and that's prismatic hunters are what everyone's playing right now. So it's like, why would you? I'm glad they buffed it. I'm glad they brought it back to how it was. I don't think they needed to nerf it as much as they did in PvP, because I think like I don't know that young like trip mines are easy enough to avoid if you're paying attention. I think they just kind of like, I don't know. I like to exploit people not paying attention by trip mining things. Anyway. Like, but it's just
you like to exploit people.
Yeah, I just think that they really just need to shake things up in a really drastic way.
You need to clip that.
And if they just like get people out of their comfort zone, like really rock things up. Yeah, that's the main thing.
I think the reason people get bored of the game is because they just use the same things over and over again. I think that's where the problem lies. All right, yes, recycling content and things like that is a problem, and the way seasons sort of work the same. But I do think, like, just changing your guns up is, like, that's interesting enough for some, but they don't even try that.
Right. And when we got,
I don't really play on my other characters that much anymore.
Right.
Like, at all, just because I don't have the time and other things. But recently I was like, I'll go on my hunter, and I like using Dragon Shadow with a sniper because it's just free. It's just free. Don't nerf it, Bungie, please. I just want another ornament. But yeah, like that made me play more, just because it's like, well, I'm changing up a bit. All right, there are going to be some people who would play every single character all week,
right,
and get bored. But I think it does help to change things up in just using different stuff yourself.
Yeah. I try to, like, I go out of my way, especially like if I'm just grinding out strikes or gambit or something. I'm like, what's a weird weapon I haven't used in a while, or what's an interesting build, or like a funky exotic. Like, I try to do that, and like certainly 12 loadouts is like not nearly enough for how many kind of fun things there is potentially.
Especially now that it's bugged.
I know. Well, that's a whole other thing. All right, so all of that to say, one of my biggest gripes for this season are some of the modifiers that they added to strikes. I
have not played strikes at all.
So one of them, this goes back to the play how you want.
Right.
And I know it sounds like I'm kind of contradicting myself right here, where it's like so here, let me read you the modifier, and then it'll hopefully piss you off as much as it does. So it's called Oscillation. This is in Vanguard Ops. So dealing damage with a scout rifle, pulse rifle, and grenade launcher gradually reduces their damage while increasing the damage of submachine guns, shotguns, and vice versa. Other weapon types deal significantly less damage. So basically pigeonholes you into using, 6 different weapon archetypes?
I guess you could run... I mean, you end up running double primary, but it'd be cool to see how much damage you could do with... You build up the stack and you prop Master of Arms on a Recluse.
Yeah.
But, I mean... It sounds like a... I'm wondering if they're testing this out for a future game mode.
Maybe.
Because obviously they did testing for roguelike mechanics in what do you call it?
The Season of the Wish.
The dive, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That too. That was cool.
And I'm wondering if we're going to get a proper roguelike mode at some point where you get, different things, different effects, and obviously you pick different ones every time, you unlock an effect. I don't know. Like you did an Onslaught game mode where every 5 levels you get to pick a effect, and one of the effects is like that. And it's like, oh well, I'm running a shotgun and a pulse rifle, so that's cool because I can get kills with my pulse rifle, and then I've got a trench barrel. I don't know. I've got a trench barrel shotgun, and I'm gonna annihilate the boss now.
Right.
So I think maybe it's for that, but. Yeah, decreasing damage. I get you have to have drawbacks in some ways with effects like that. But if it's in strikes, they should just take that drawback off.
Yeah, especially since... So one of the things that I'm trying to balance out the annoying things with the good things. So they added that, and one of the things that I'm glad they did is they split apart the Pathfinders, right? So there's a different one for strikes, Gambit, and Crucible. But then it's now you're trying to complete those bounties or challenges whilst also being forced to use certain loadouts and types, and it seems like it kind of contradicts each other. So that's one modifier. Here's the one that's really stupid and completely ruined a Nightfall run that I was doing because I didn't realize that it was on, and basically we were getting one shot and doing no damage. So it's called Void Hunger. First of all, it's really incredibly long, so bear with me here. So Savathun has this is, mind you, a modifier in a Nightfall. Savathun has loaned you a worm. When it hungers, deal damage of the focus type to satiated. When the worm is full, your ability regeneration is increased. If the worm starves, your ability regeneration is reduced, and you take increased damage from the focus damage type.
That sounds exactly like a roguelike game effect. They're just like one for one, survival roguelike game mode. I don't know. I imagine they're testing these things.
Right, but if it locks your loadout...
Oh, yeah.
That's a problem. So I was doing a Master Nightfall...
I mean, if you knew that was an effect going in, obviously you could run, Hardlight or Borealis or...
Right, but Borealis and Hardlight don't have champion mods this season.
No,
so,
no.
It's these weird... get rid of champions if you're going to do that, or don't lock loadouts for certain things, or have, more ability to do this, and it's just
hey, you could have run I forgot the name of the GL now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
Dead Messenger.
Well, no, you couldn't have because it was barrier and unstop, and that's overload this season. So
there you go then.
Yeah. What else you got? So like,
just be radiant, like forehead, you know.
Right. So there's just there's just weird things this season of like, what do they want us to do in this game? And it's like it
genuinely just sounds like they're testing to me. Like
Right.
it just sounds like I'm not giving them a pass on it because
Right.
it's in a locked loadout activity, but it genuinely does sound like they're testing what people think of these effects,
Right.
and then they're going to add them to a roguelike game mode, which I would play a lot of. I think if it was done well.
Yeah, they're just. There needs to be the appropriate support
maybe it's in the
around
Prison
it.
of Elders. Maybe it's in the Prison of Elders thing.
That would be interesting. But I think here's the thing is that so I did that Nightfall, and it had champions in it, and it also had those new enemies that are like, what are they called, Banes or whatever. Like,
I literally have not. I don't think I've actually had seen one yet.
Oh, they're I think they're only in like Legend/Master. I don't know what the I don't
think they're
in
Legend. Are they in Legend Onslaught? Because I haven't done that.
I have not. Well, it's not called Legend anymore. It's called Expert and something else. That's another thing too. Is like we've been so stuck on these like names for difficulties, and then they just kind of changed them for some reason, and it doesn't like now I have to like relearn a whole vernacular. And I know it sounds like a thing like I'm complaining about, and I am, but it's like it was just like such an unnecessary change because now it's like, why do you call it grandmaster if there's not a master anymore or whatever? Like it's so weird. I don't know what they're doing. Like they're trying things out. I don't want to fault them for that, but they're trying it in the weirdest ways and not like giving the appropriate support for it. Like, I don't know. It's frustrating right now. Like it's hard for me to want to play when it feels like awkwardly restrictive in, a way that it shouldn't be. I will also my last comment on this before I feel like I'm just turning into a pity party. I'm really mad that they got rid of weapon crafting or for the seasonal weapons. I think that was a terrible decision that they should not have done.
Wait, there's no crafting on them?
Yeah, you can't craft any of the seasonal weapons.
That doesn't even make any sense.
Which I think is ultimately going to have the opposite effect. Because now I don't really feel like pursuing any of them because
I'm the opposite. I'm crafting has made me so uninterested in guns because I'm like, oh well, I'm just gonna get a red border and just vault it, like a red box, and just vault it, a crafted version. I'm not gonna like that's had after the first few seasons of crafting. That's what I've been doing. I've literally gone, oh, I've got the 5 red borders. Cool, I can craft it now. Am I going to use it? No. Now I'm like, ooh, I'll grind for a gun.
Right, but the problem is these weapons are only around for a short time, and now I
don't have all the time in the world. Before I'm going to clarify as well because people go,
sure.
Oh, you must have no, I don't have that much time to play the game. I am a normal person. I play a normal amount of Destiny, like an average player's amount of Destiny, and I want there to be more of a grind because that it is a looter shooter at the end of the day. That is why I play it.
That's fine. That you can have the grind, but I feel like the red borders were a way to both solve vault-based problems and also solve the problem of I don't know what weapons I want to hold on to because they do periodically just change a perk in a very substantial way. And it's like, oh man, I dismantled my attrition orbs hand cannon. Now I don't have one. Well, before, if I could craft it, I could just swap things around and now I can use that. But if you're going to have these weapons that are only around for a limited time, they need to be craftable. And really the weapon crafting thing 100% solves a huge part of the vault space problem.
I think if they need to do weapon crafting for seasonal guns, then they should make it that you can't get all the perks.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think it should just be a select number of perks that you can craft on the gun that's like a 3.5 out of 5 roll.
Right.
Whereas if you can get a perfect 5 out of 5 crafted gun, then it's I think is pointless, because I think there's also an aspect of you grind for a gun. The gun I got, though it's the same weapon, is not going to have the same perks on it. However, with a crafted gun, we're going to go in there and go, well, they're the two best perks on the gun. I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
Though obviously you can be farming for the same role, and you eventually do. Your chance that you do get the same role, but that's chance. Whereas now it's like I've got all these guns from the past seasons. I don't even get half the red borders anymore because I haven't the scout rifle from season of the witch. I didn't have the red crafted version of that. I needed one more, and I got it from Zer, I think, this weekend because he was selling it.
Sure.
And it's like, I'm never using that gun ever, but I would be more inclined to try it if like I had to grind for a certain role for it. Whereas like, oh, I can craft it. Like it just really makes me disinterested in grinding for anything, because it's like, well, I don't even need to play the activity more than I need to, because I can just buy the red border from the vendor as well. I'm not saying that's bad and they shouldn't have that when there are red borders, but I'm not even actively trying to get a red border at that point from the activity.
Right. Well, I think that's more of a problem with how easy they've made it.
Yeah.
Which
I
go for it.
No, it's just I don't think that you should be able to get, like, they shouldn't have all the perks on the craftable gun. I think that's just stupid.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Especially in raids.
Yeah,
why are raid guns craftable?
Yeah. That's
it. Literally, I go into an activity, end-game activity, that has craftable weapons in. A gun drops.
Right.
I see it's not a red border. I don't even look at the roll. It's gone.
Right.
I don't even keep, because it's like, well, what's the point of keeping that when I can get a red border? I can get the perfect, mag on it as well.
Right.
And barrel, even if it's got the two perks I want. Oh, and I can enhance them as well. Well, there's no point in keeping that because it's not a red border. Like,
yeah,
that's how I feel in every bit of content that has craftable weapons in.
Yeah, I ultimately agree with you. The enhancing perks that was a terrible idea that they never should have done. I agree with you that there should be some benefit or drawback to the red border version of them, like where not every perk is available. I do think that it's too easy to get too many red borders. Like I know, like last season, there were people that were able to craft that new solar sidearm like the day the weapon dropped, because the drops were so plentiful. And they also added that stupid currency that's in the season pass where you can like put a red border on a weapon, and like, so they've sort of like made it way too accessible. Whereas I feel like specifically Season of the Haunted, where we were back on the Dreadnought, and I really, really wanted to be able to craft an Austringer. I spent so much goddamn time running around.
You mean the Leviathan?
Yeah, in the Leviathan, trying to find chests.
I thought you were talking about next episode. I was like, he's already played it.
Oh, yeah. On the Leviathan, sorry. I spent so much time on there grinding out Austringers, trying to get red borders, where it was like, I did not have it unlocked in the first week. Like, it took several weeks.
I did the same. I grinded for the red borders, but it's the same thing at the end of the day where, and I know you're saying you agree, where even if I got a good roll of Austringer, I'd be like, well, I'm just going to delete it. Because it's not the red, it's not the crafted one.
Yeah, but that's fine, because eventually if you do want to craft it, you can. And it's like,
yeah.
I don't know, it just
I just don't think you should be able to get the 5 out of 5. That's not a gatekeeping thing. I think it's just because I'm not like trying to gatekeep a god roll from someone who didn't have enough time to play it. That's not what I'm saying. It's that it's so boring.
Yeah.
Like, because there's also like there's also the social aspect of, guys, look, I did this activity and I got this good gun. Or, oh, cool, I did this. And I mean, even sometimes it's funny where you do an activity and you get a shit roll. Like, not all the time it's funny, but occasionally, oh, I got Pugalist and, I don't know, Guerrilla Fighter. I know that's not a perk anymore, but, like, that's terrible. Like, that is a terrible roll, but
right.
You can laugh about it a bit. Like,
right.
I got an ill will in Destiny 1 with like where the reload speed takes like fucking 10 years to reload, and I've got married by the time the gun's ready to fire again.
Right.
But it's there's a social aspect as well. I don't have it anymore where I remember like I'd have it a lot, but now with crafting, my friends would join like before that and they look, I did this last night, I did trials last night, and I got this gun. Now it's like, oh, cool, I got this roll. Oh, it's not a red border, though, so it's pointless. Especially with raid weapons, mainly. But I think seasonal guns still have that problem.
Having weapons that are not craftable, like in the raid, where they are around forever is fine. Or having, like, the world drop weapons from, like, Banshee, like the Rosarago is a perfect example, right? I'm still looking for a perfect Rosarago, and that's fine. Like that keeps things interesting. I get that dopamine hit every time I get a Rosarago to drop because it's like, ooh, is this the one I'm looking for? Like, I totally agree that the grind goes away as soon as you can craft the weapon. But considering that seasonal weapons are not around forever, that's the problem. I think if you're going to have limited time weapons, then you need to have some kind of like light at the end of the tunnel. Have raid weapons be super rare and make them be like the thing that you pursue. And it's like, yeah, we were talking like some of my buddies have 100+ completions on Vault of Glass, but that's because they were trying to get the perfect Fatebringer, and they finally have it, and that thing's not leaving their side. But it's a trophy and a mark of like, yeah, it took me 100+ runs, but I finally got it. But like seasonal weapons are the one thing that shouldn't have the red border taken away from them because they go away after a while. And like, that's the problem. Have everything else be pursuant, but not the thing that goes away. Not the actual FOMO thing.
Maybe just make it so you can't enhance the crafted one. The perks on the crafted one.
Yeah, that's fine. I hate enhanced perks.
There needs to be a middle ground, but then because then you get to a point where if you took crafted guns out of raids, you would then have seasonal guns that were better than raid guns, if you could enhance them still. So
yeah, I that's why. Well, I think
yeah.
I mean, if you want to be able to enhance raid weapons, that's fine. Or
but you can't craft them.
Or just get rid of enhancements and go back to having elusive perks on raid weapons. Like, the moment that they put rewind rounds on, like, world drops, it kind of bummed me out. Because it's like, well, there goes the fun elusivity of Vault of Glass weapons. Because that was
Maybe raid guns should just be adept.
Yeah.
Maybe
that's fine.
Maybe they're just adept.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, then
it's cool having two versions of guns.
What's the point of doing master mode then?
Oh yeah, no, I was going to say like you would then have to have something for that, but unless they change how these guns are going forward, I think this is why people were so bored of this. Maybe it's going to change and they're going to experiment more, like they said they would with their content wise. But I think if it keeps going, it will just bore people.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, there's a few different ways.
I haven't chased a gun in a very, very long time. I think the last gun I chased was Rose when it first came back in comp.
Well, and
I think that was the last gun I chased.
Well, what about the onslaught weapons? When they brought those back, they made like I am still trying to find.
I didn't really care. Like, I mean, I don't really. There wasn't. I knew I would just sort of passively get them by playing it, if you know what I mean. I didn't go, I want this gun with this specific role. I just sort of played the game mode and was like, oh, I got a good roll of it. Okay. I didn't really chase anything.
Well, that's fair. But they also added the aspect of like the shinies on them.
Yeah.
Where it's like, that's a cool thing. They got the double perks, and like that's a really neat kind of trophy to pursue. But you can still go play Onslaught and still target farm specific weapons.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm driving home here is the FOMO aspect, where it's like, if you don't get that Exuvier, I'm just using that as an example because that's like the only interesting weapon from the season that I'm even like kind of interested in trying to Target Farm
Is that the hand cannon?
is it's the Stasis 120 hand cannon.
Okay.
That's because it's got that new perk, the Rhyme Stealer. Yeah, Rhyme Stealer Headstone is kind of a nutty perk that you can get on it, and it's like, that's cool. I want to get that, but I don't really have any interest in any of the other weapons because it's like, maybe they're good, maybe they're not. Like, I'll look at the perks, but like, I'm of the mindset of like, I want to be able to craft it, so if I want to go back and play with it because, oh, this perk combo is now suddenly interesting and wasn't before, I can go do that. But I've like kind of lost any interest if so. I'm glad that we're having this kind of like slight headbutting conversation about this because it is two different philosophies, and this just goes to show that there's no good solution here. But they also, I think it comes down to they just shower us with so much loot that there's like the dopamine hit has kind of been lost on like everybody. Like we just have such a high expectation of we need to be showered in loot, and if we don't get everything we want on the first week, it's like it's a problem. But it's like but that's the whole point of a game like this, is you are supposed to grind it and get the weapon that you're looking for. And it feels so rewarding when you finally get that Rasarago that's got the 5 out of 5 that you want, or at least the perks that you're looking for, you know. And it's like all of that's kind of been lost with weapon crafting, which probably shouldn't have happened in the first place, or it should have been subdued much more than it was. I still go back to during this is going to be a throwback, during House of Wolves, when Banshee would allow you to re-roll weapons, the perks on there, and it was kind of expensive, and everyone kind of made the argument, well, like they got rid of it because, you know, everyone was basically going for the same perks, and it's like, here we are, you know, 10 years later, and now
Shop
it's
package.
like it's been like trivialized, but it was still an RNG slot machine that you had to pull. But it's like, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but I do think the FOMO aspect kind of like kills it for me, of like, I don't feel like grinding these weapons out because it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I would rather have,
it's a lot.
I would rather have there be a grind and know that if I put enough time in there, eventually I will be able to craft an exuviate. I don't want to do it the first week. I know people expect to at this point, and I think therein lies the problem.
Yeah, but that's the problem is people would. I genuinely saw people on the first day like, oh, I've got the last episode, I've got the sidearm now, I'm bored.
Right.
It's like, well, you kind of did that. You kind of did that to yourself.
Exactly.
Like, there's the middle. There's going to be a middle ground.
Right.
Like, yeah, all right. If you know you're going to be busy or something for the rest of the month and you want to get it, I get it. But it is, yeah.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know what they could do to make people happy.
I'm going to go out on a limb, and this is going to be a super controversial. Like, I'm just going to say, people play this game too much. And
I agree.
It's the same it's the same thing.
Yeah,
like, you see it in Diablo, where it's like people were hitting level 100 with multiple characters on the first day.
But this, I mean, this comes down to how people like perceive things and what they think about other people are doing. Like, at large, because people watch. This is more to do with content creators in the end. Right. People watch content creators who play the game for a living because that's what they do.
Right.
They will go through everything very, very quickly.
Right.
And they'll go, well, I've got nothing to do now.
Right.
And then you get their fans who aren't actually going through all the content very quickly, but they watch those people, then regurgitating that same viewpoint. Right. Yes, there are people who don't make content who just blitz through everything and do everything straight away. There are those sorts of people. Right. However, it is... I find the people who are going, there's nothing to do, are typically, I'd say 50% of the time, not actual people who have done everything. Right. They're just saying that.
Right.
Because they heard someone say that they have done everything.
Yeah, and that's a whole other problem. But yes, you are completely correct. And it's
like, and it's very, very stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
No original thoughts were had during that.
I also kind of don't. I guess maybe we'll save this for
But that comes back to time gating as well.
Yeah. Well, and that's a I think probably the last real bastion of complaint that I have about this game that I know I'm talking about Diablo 4 a lot, but it's like I've just been playing it a lot lately, is
traitor.
We need to get rid of weekly lockout. Like, if I want to grind a raid,
I think that would make it worse.
But does it though? Because
yes.
I got euphony.
It would make the community sentiment of that there's nothing to do worse. It wouldn't. All right, I don't think it would actually have a negative impact on the game. I think it would have a negative impact on the community, which would then in turn have a negative impact on the game because there'd be a stigma of there's nothing to do. Like, look at the game at the minute, right? Final Shape was very, very, very good. Probably the best DLC that they've done, right? And the only reason I'd say the player numbers were down and community sentiment was down was because of the layoffs, right?
Sure.
That's got nothing to do with the actual state of the game itself. That's the state of morale in the company and the community. If there was a morale in the community of there's nothing to do, we can do it, we've done it all, it would make people play less, even if they haven't actually got nothing to do.
Right.
Like, I felt like I wanted to play... I still played the game, but I still felt like I wanted to play the game less when all the layoffs happened.
Yeah, no, I definitely had like a I don't want to engage in content right now. I agree.
Yeah, and but that's got nothing to do with the actual game itself in the sense of the content is bad.
Right.
Like, we got a good raid, and now we've got a good new dungeon as well.
Right.
The dungeon is really well made.
Right.
And I'm glad they're now, focusing on that sort of thing going forward, and we can see the increase in quality there in dungeons.
Right.
Like, look at Shattered Throne and Pit of Heresy. I'm not saying they're bad, but versus Vesper.
Totally.
Right.
Vesper's got its own armor set,
right,
its own set of weapons, and now going forward, they're going to get a whole set of weapons as well.
But here's the problem with that.
With the new content change.
I love Vespers too, but that is a separate charge. So that's the stupid $20 dungeon.
Right.
On top of the seasonal content.
Yes. I mean, but that's what I'm saying is before they were free or tied with a DLC, but they had no unique stuff tied to them at all.
Sure. Oh, yeah, I see.
So I would argue that they're paying... I mean, I buy the deluxe edition, so I don't have to pay them separately.
Right.
Obviously, I know they do sometimes make it tricky, and it is not clear for new people buying that it's obvious that they're separate. But I think going forward, the dungeon key is not a thing, but they're tying the price of you're basically paying for the season, you're paying for the dungeon, I believe is what is sort of happening next year.
Yeah.
So dungeons are getting a whole armor set and a whole more weapons than we're getting now, because we've only dungeons typically get 5-6 weapons at the most.
Yeah.
But we're paying for that, whereas before they wouldn't. They'd get an emblem. Like Pit of Heresy and Shattered Throne, they have an exotic tied to them, but the gear you earn and the weapons you earn are all just from that DLC. And it's like the content is better than it's been, but the morale at the minute is low because of changes going on at the company and behind the scenes and things like that. And I think if you were able to just grind, I'm not saying it's it's good for some people, but if you could just free-willingly grind everything, like I could do VOG so many times in a week and get, as many times as I want, I think it would just create a sentiment of, I've done everything. Yeah, I'm bored.
But the problem is,
Sorry, that was a long tangent to get back to that point.
That's fine, and I don't disagree necessarily with anything that you're saying. The problem is, though, that's like the one thing, though, that's frustrating is let me grind for the exotic as much as I want when I want, and don't force me to not get Vex Mythoclast for 17 weeks or however. It took me. It took me 50. It took me 50 plus runs.
We get what we get to. Now we get 2 pinnacle raids, and dungeons a week now.
Right.
The weekly raid.
And that's cool.
Maybe change it so there's a weekly rotating raid and a weekly rotating dungeon. And then the other slot that you get, you can pick a raid or dungeon that week that you specifically, say, it's Vault of Glass and Shattered Throne this week. But the other slot for the Pinnacle raid and dungeon, you can pick. So everyone's is different.
Yeah.
So then you can plan to, because then you can go on LFG and you can see other people. Oh, look, they're doing Vow. I want to get that pulse rifle for some reason.
Right.
Or, I want to do Root of Nightmares. I want Conditional. I haven't got it yet. It's not the weekly raid. However, I can focus that raid for the week, and then it will be, I can then grind that raid. If they did it like that, maybe.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I think if everything was open completely, that would then cause a problem.
Well, but I'm talking about the newest content when it drops is
right.
Here's a new weapon.
I thought you meant every single dungeon raid endgame content you could just grind eternally from now on.
Well, I think you should be able to I let people if they want to make here's a perfectly good example. If you want to make a Rain of Fire build because you think fusion rifles are just the tits, and I'm using that example because I'm kind of one of those people.
Scott, you're not Scotty. Scott, you love fusion rifles. This is for you,
right? So I want to make a Rain of Fire build because I got those. I'm a new player. I got those pants to drop. Those are badass. But you need fusion rifles. Well, as it turns out, there's only one primary fusion rifle, which is Vex Mythoclast, and I want to go grind for that weapon until I can unlock it. Well, it's not on the rotator, so I have to wait for it to be on the rotator. Or otherwise, I can make. I'm a brand new player, right? So I can run it once per week with a chance of getting it. Now I'm kind of losing interest more and more and more, and maybe it's 15 weeks goes by, or I guess now it's every 4 weeks where that becomes the new that's on the one where you can do it, you can grind it infinitely many times, right? As long as you grab the boss checkpoint. But that's a problem because I want to get into a specific build, and if I'm way behind, or I'm now finally getting into endgame content, I have to wait for it to come up on a specific rotation. Or I'll use the example of Euphony, where I found out that it's a linear fusion rifle in the kinetic slot that's all about doing stuff with threadlings, which I might be the one person. I made a comment that I like necromancers and I like minion builds and things like that. I like threadlings. I was super excited that I found out that was the exotic, but it took me, I don't know, almost to the end of halfway through the second act before I got it unlocked. And by that point, everyone in my clan was burned out on playing that raid because this goes back to the red border. Everyone had the red borders that they wanted. But by that point, there was no interest in doing that. And I finally got it unlocked, and I wanted to try it as a DPS option for that boss. And now it's it took me so long to finally unlock that weapon, doing it 3 runs per week per character, or one run per character per week. And by the time I finally got it, the ability to use it was kind of lost. And I was kind of just I don't feel like running this anymore. And now we have with Vesper's Host, you have Icebreaker, which is an iconic Destiny 1 weapon, but now you're on a lockout where you get 3 chances per week to unlock it. And it's stop doing that. That's all I want is everything else can be sought and pursued in whatever capacity you want. Don't have the lockout be 3 times. Because now what's happening is I'm going to grab the boss checkpoint, run it 3 times on my character, and then go, well, I'm not going to bother playing this dungeon until next week.
I don't think they'd ever change it based on that's what the game's always been like.
I know, and that needs to die.
But that's what creates numbers of people playing the game.
But it doesn't.
Because then it becomes less like a live service game at that point.
Because but all that people are doing is they just grab the boss checkpoint, run it those 3 times. If that's all they're trying to get, and they're not interested, because it's I want to play with Icebreaker. I want to try to make a build around it using stasis. That seems really, really cool.
I think it would just I think overall there are people who have this sentiment and that they want to get a raid exotic, they haven't got it yet, and they've done it 50 plus times, 100 plus times.
Terrible feeling.
But I think it would have a more negative impact on the community as a whole and the player base as a whole if weekly reset basically wasn't a thing, because there would be no reason to come back next week.
You're probably right, but that sentiment is definitely seen where people are so desperate to unlock everything so that they don't have to play the game anymore, and that's like a whole gamer problem now in general.
Yeah, but that would, but it would also tie back to like the, like Bungie of studying how and why and the reasons what gets people to come back, and that is one of them. Of it's weekly reset, I can do that raid again.
Yeah.
Because if you took that away, people would just grind that whole week to get every single thing in that raid because people are mental. And then they would never play the game again.
Yeah, but I think those same people are still going to be the ones that are just going to grab the boss checkpoint. And they're logging in every week, but they're only playing the game for 2 hours and then bugging out if they don't get it.
But I think it still would have just an overall negative impact. Like, it would be positive for the people who are unlucky and, don't get the dungeon or raid exotic after 30 like I haven't got the what's the spire exotic, the bow.
Hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, I haven't got that.
You're not missing much.
I know I'm a different I know I'm like a separate individual I haven't got the Ghost of the Deep exotic either. I don't even feel like doing Ghost of the Deep ever again, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a
but I don't think I've got all the weapons from it. But it's like, if you're going to make a few people happy, but then the sentiment of the game would then become shit because people are so obsessed with doing everything in the game that they can because of FOMO. Even though there isn't actual FOMO on raids and dungeons. At the minute there isn't. They're not, but people are like, I want to do this. I want to get this thing before other people do. But a lot of people are like that in games at all. Like, people, I mean, look at me. I grinded the legend title straight away because I just wanted it.
Sure.
Right. I was insane enough to sit in the Skywatch for fuck knows how long, getting legendary engrams to drop, killing the same enemies over and over and over again. Right.
Right.
And I don't think I'm that insane when it comes to Destiny anymore, at least.
Right.
But there are hundreds of thousands of people who play the game who, over the years as well, who, if they could just do everything at once, then they would.
Yeah.
And then no one would be playing the game.
I don't accept that as like a complete narrative because
I think they would never change it because of the psychology around having a weekly reset. It's the same reason why mobile games and free games have like a sign-in, like a daily, they have dailies. Technically Destiny did have those, but less so. You know what I mean? Like, you sign in, you get a thing for signing on. If you sign in for 7 days in a row, you get a thing. Free games do that, and Destiny is a free game now. So
yeah,
or free to try, however you want to say it. But it needs that weekly reset thing because there's going to be people who aren't playing the story. They don't buy the season. So they don't have, not everyone who plays the game buys the seasonal content. So they don't have the seasonal story. And I mean, most people who play the game, I doubt, are like, I can't wait to see the seasonal story this week. I can't wait to see what random place I'm going to be sent to kill 5 enemies and then jump up and down. People come in to play the game to do the raids. Like, I know on Tuesday I'll want to do the dungeon again. I'm probably less likely to come on Tuesday if I knew I could grind the dungeon eternally.
I don't agree with that because
I think it's just the psychology behind it. Even if it's morally wrong, the psychology behind it because it preys on people. Like, I've got to do this thing, but I've got to wait. It's like they're not going to change that. I do not think they would change that ever. because every game does that in a sense. Like every game has a weekly reset, even if it's just the shop refreshing. Like on Overwatch, they have a weekly reset, and it's just the shop, which 90% of the things in the shop you have to spend premium currency on, which you have to spend money on. There's no way of earning it. So, but people still come on to see what is in the shop. I still see people post updates of what is in the shop. But that happens every week. And it's the same thing with that. You can't always buy, even though it's premium stuff, and this is a completely different thing in the sense of playing something versus buying something. You can't buy the skins that are in the shop. They rotate. It's the same, I believe, on Fortnite as well. And there's a psychology behind that. And they will. I'm not saying you're wrong in the sense of, it's unfair on some people who have shit RNG, but it's something they would never ever change because it completely goes against basically modern gaming.
But see, this is the last time I'll use this. But Diablo 4 has what are called mythic uniques, which are incredibly rare and borderline game breaking because they give outrageous stat abilities or are just so like absurd that it's like there are certain builds that are like if you get one, it sort of like unlocks a new echelon of like capability. You can grind those out to your heart's content as long as you keep, because you basically need to get boss materials. But ultimately you can that's what I've been doing for the last like week. Are
they tied to a very specific activity though? Like one of them is tied to this activity and one of them is tied to another activity.
So yes and no. They are, as far as I know, they're all equal likelihood to drop from what are called because they're called uber bosses, which are like incredibly high tier, high difficult. Like you can do it on an easier difficulty, but the drop rate is like much lower.
Right.
So it's
that sounds more like an exotic than like an exotic engram rather than a raid or dungeon piece of armor or weapon.
No, but they have the same like elusivity of like.
Yeah, I agree with you. But if you can earn them, if they're a random chance of one of these specific things from a random boss, that's not a specific piece of content, right? That you can eternally farm. That's like farming for exotic engrams or something like that, rather than a very specific weapon, a very specific piece of armor from a specific activity. Like if it was from like, oh, there's an activity in Diablo that you need so many people for, or something like that, and you could grind that eternally, then I would say yeah, that is different. But if it's like a general grind thing, like just exotic engrams, you can farm for those eternally.
Yeah,
there's no lockout.
You can get uniques. So I would say uniques are kind of the equivalent to exotics, where they are, but mythics are like a whole tier above that, and they technically can drop from anywhere. But the likelihood is so small that your best time sink is to farm other materials or other activities so you can get these boss mats. And mind you, there's only 6 of these bosses. They all drop the same mostly. I mean, there's a little bit of nuance with the likelihood for certain bosses, but ultimately it is that is the pinnacle end game thing to go for, is if you can get a mythic, let alone multiple, like that completely changes how you do your build. And I would say that is no different than I need Vex Mythic class because I want to do a Rain of Fire build. Therefore, I would like to farm Atheon until I can get that. That's no different than me wanting to farm Uber Duriel until I can get a Shaco that will ultimately help me for my build. Like that, but I can do it as much as I want. And literally the other night we played until we got tired because it's like, all right, well, we'll save more boss materials for tomorrow. But we did it until we were tired of doing it, not the other way around of if I could only defeat him once a week and go, well, I guess next week I'll try for my one chance at a Shaco, I would not play and engage with it the way I did.
They're different. I mean, I think they're different things at the end of the day, where you get a chance at one of these specific items, right, at this level, whereas the raid exotic, if that's what you want to compare it to, it's not like when you beat the boss, you get a chance at the armor, the weapons, and the exotic. It's you get an armor and a weapon drop, and then on top of that, there's a chance to get the raid exotic.
It's that you get multiple drops. You can get other items from farming it.
Oh no. But what it sounds like, it doesn't sound like a raid or dungeon exotic. It sounds just more comparable with a general item, like a world drop exotic, because it's a specific piece of content. You're playing and you've paid for that specific. They're related to the content. If it was completely unrelated, I would agree. But it sounds like they're the Vex Mythocast is Vex themed.
Sure. But the point is
that they're related to the content that you're playing, whereas that just sounds like you can do this thing. I'd say more like a Nightfall. A GM Nightfall. That sounds more like, I would say, is the comparison there, which are farmable. You can just eternally play that. Obviously, the weapon rotates weekly, but you can just farm. I mean, obviously, you can farm.
Yeah, but we're not talking about a scintillation like linear fusion rifle where any old one would do just fine. Like,
I mean like an exotic armor piece. I should have clarified. Like you can get exotic armor pieces from Nightfalls.
Right. So why does something like Vex Mythoclast need to be so elusive just because it's the raid exotic?
Because it gets people to play the content.
Yeah, but this gets me to farm Uber bosses because I want to do that. Like it doesn't.
But you're more like. But it comes down to the psychology of it. You're probably gonna more likely be playing Destiny. All right, obviously people quit games. At the end of you're probably going to spend more time playing Destiny than you're going to spend playing Diablo 4 in the long run. Because you're getting the thing faster. If there's a possibility that you can get the thing very, 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 very quickly, like what happens with the red borders, it then makes it so people have less reason to play the game. It's the same like of people getting the red borders and like, they get like that sidearm. They got them on the first day and they went, well, fuck, I've got nothing to play now. If there's even a chance that you can basically just get everything of this new end game piece of content in the first week then it comes out, there's literally no reason for you to play or them to make the content at that point because it's too quick. You've gone for it too quick.
If earning that particular item makes your build more interesting, that allows you to then do harder content, because that's ultimately what the strive in Diablo is. You kind of hit a lull in your build where you basically, and I'm generalizing, but basically if you don't get one of these mythics, you kind of hit a wall in terms of like pit difficulty that you can do. And pit is like the pinnacle in game of like, it goes all the way up to difficulty 150. And if you don't have one of these mythics or multiple mythics that define your build, you're probably going to be stuck somewhere in the 70s or 80s. And getting this allows you to push your build even further and try harder content, which is what you should then be striving for. And
if we were still in like the Forever 29 era, I'd agree, because it literally locked you out of being, the highest light level, or stopped you from playing this. But we're at a point in the game where you don't need Vex Mythocast to complete another dungeon or raid over there. It's just the icing on the cake.
Unless you're trying to do a Rain of Fire build like that, and
that's so. No, I get what you're saying, but it's so very specific. It that doesn't stop you from playing the game, whereas that in the Diablo instance, that's stopping you from playing the game effectively. No worries, Scotty. Keep arguing.
but it's also like, it is ultimately restricting my fun, because it's like, oh, Icebreaker's out, I would like to be able to play.
Yeah, no.
And that's therein lies the problem, because it sucks the fun ultimately out of it. And at a certain point, like, I stopped doing Warlord's Ruin after a while because I was so disheartened in not getting a buried bloodline that I didn't feel like grinding it 3 times a week on my character. And it was just like, oh, maybe I'll eventually get it. So they kind of like weaseled me away from wanting to do that content. Whereas if I found out that I could keep playing it until I eventually earned a buried bloodline, I would probably have engaged it a lot more. But you get to this point where you get over this hump of like, I'm so tired of doing this because I can't do it when I want. I have to log in on Tuesday and grab a boss checkpoint and play it a couple hours. Like that's a problem, that needs to die.
But I think that just what keeps people playing the game. If that went, no one would play the game. There would be no reason to. And I know you can argue, then they need to have a different incentive, like the seasonal content needs to be better, but then not everyone buys the seasonal content, and that's story stuff. It's not drop stuff. It just, like, does Diablo have weekly reset?
They officially do now because they added a raid. Like I'm using the term raid very loosely because the mechanics aren't super engaging, but it's fun enough.
Is it 3 or 6?
What's that?
Is it 3 or 6 man?
It's a 4-man activity.
All right, okay.
But it's ultimately the weekly lockout is the first time you complete it in a week, you get like a chest of like ancestral uniques and things like that. But you can ultimately get those in other locations. Like it doesn't have this item only drops from this activity and you only get one shot per week to do it. It doesn't have anything like that. So there is a lockout, but it's very like it's a bonus.
It's less of a live service game than say Destiny.
I don't think so. It's got a season pass. It's got all kinds of seasonal activities.
I think that's just more like monetization at the end of the day. But I was gonna say, like MMOs, they have their weekly reset.
Yeah,
that's like just commonplace in everything. And then other games have that now. As I said, Overwatch or Fortnite, like their shop is on a weekly reset. So it drives people to play the game because it drives you to come on the game or even to just check an update for the game, because it's like, I want to, even though it's to spend money, which I think is insane at the end of the day. Like I will buy skins on Overwatch occasionally, but I don't sit there every reset going, oh, I can't wait to see in the shop to spend real money,
right?
You know, but that's what people do. We've got to the point in gaming where that's what people do, and that's commonplace.
Yeah,
and that's been commonplace in Destiny for so long. But it drives engagement. It's the same reason why they added the Pinnacle stuff on, because it's tied to weekly reset of people doing stuff of I need light level. I'm not saying you're wrong in the sense of there are people who don't want to play the game. Like you said, you don't want to do Warlords of Ruin. I'd say it's the opposite for me. I keep playing the game if I don't get something. I'm sometimes bored because I get it. I have good RNG mostly.
Right.
There are some dungeons I've done countless times. I've not got the exotic, but I don't really care. But that's me. But I've typically got the raid exotics within the first few completions. But that's RNG.
Right.
But I haven't played like Root of Nightmares. I find really fun. I haven't played it in ages because my clan has the exotic and they don't want to play it. Right. I'm not saying one of them has to go, cry in a corner because they have to be unlucky for 100 tries because I want to play the raid more. But it keeps people playing the content. I feel like people are more likely to keep playing if they don't get something and there's a weekly reset, rather than people get bored of the content. I'm not disagreeing with you on that sense, because I do see it, of people going, I didn't get this gun I wanted, I've tried 50 times, I fucking give up.
Right.
Which I have sympathy for people like that, because fucking hell, that is unlucky. But obviously it can happen.
Yeah.
But what I'm arguing, I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's immoral, but the psychology behind it is the player numbers would go down if you could just eternally farm the whole game. Like, just, like if you could eternally farm every piece of end game content to get everything in it, the player numbers would go down because you literally would have everyone doing everything. Obviously, there are people who, like us, who have lives and things like that. But I think just at the end of the day, people would. I mean, it's like when, all right, different sort of thing, but remember when Destiny first came out and everyone just grinded to light level and people didn't really understand the game, so people were playing it loads and loads and loads and loads, and that's all they did,
right?
Even if they were a normal person, it would be like that again. I think, where you'd have a month or two where the game would pop off and do really well, but then after a few months, it would be like the player numbers would be down because people would just like. I'm coming at it from like a business and like perspective as well as, you know, a player perspective. Like I'm not like coming at it from a you know, like I'm not. I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying is like I don't think they would ever do that.
And I get where you're coming from. I think I'm and this is where I would love to just sit down with one of those people whose job is to manipulate players at a company like this, where it's like, do you really like? Because there's player engagement, which I totally get, right? That's like a number that they want to see. But that I don't feel like necessarily correlates to revenue, right? Like when a new season drops, everyone logs in that first day, and the people that are going to buy stuff on Eververse are going to do it that first week anyway, right? Like it's not like 4 weeks later. Oh, I guess maybe there's like, oh, I finally got Icebreaker. Now I'll buy the ornament. But like people are going to do that if they get it the first week versus the 15th week, I think. Right. And that's why I've never understood the whole like, oh, we need player engagement. It's like, does it matter if everyone's logging in every week?
It's more of like people logging in every week because, you know, they didn't get the thing they wanted from the raid. They try it again. They might see someone. There's all different. It's like when COD did or Activision wanted to do that thing where if you don't buy any skins for COD, you're more likely to match people who do. So you see cool skins and then want to buy them. And it would be like that. You know, you passively play the game, or you see things rotate in and out of Eververse store because you're coming in every week. I mean, look at one of the only things in the game vendor-wise that resets, other than the gunsmith, which only started recently, is Eververse.
Right.
That changes every week.
Right.
And people come on for that. People have Eververse calendars and that they make, you know, I can't wait for this thing to be in the Bright Dust section.
They're not making extra money off of that part. That's the part that I don't fully understand is...
No, but there are people who, I mean, now you can't actually, not everything ends up in the Bright Dust section now. So now you're going to get people who come on and go, I want that. Like my friend Scott, he, I mean, it's his money, he can do what he wants for it. He came on, he didn't do this at the start of the season, but he saw at one point midway through last episode that there was that bundle with the, you know, all those different shaders, the strand.
Oh,
stasis. Yeah, right. I mean, you can literally buy them for, I think, at Eververse this week as we were speaking, or last week, I think so. Which was quite funny. But obviously, he knows he's going to be playing for the next few weeks, or months, or however long. So he's more inclined to spend. That's where that comes from, because he knows he's going to be playing it because he knows there's stuff that he's going to want to get in the next few weeks. Like I don't really spend money in Eververse, like not anymore. I did occasionally. I'm more. I don't know why, but I get the Dawning set. That's normally what I will spend money on. Is I'll buy the Dawning set for the Titan. For some reason, I like the Scotty.
Sure.
I like the Dawning stuff. That's typically at Christmas is when I'll spend money on myself on Destiny. But other than that, I don't really spend money in the game. Because I was actually going to have this conversation at some point. Is the way they monetize ornaments, I think, is wrong.
Sure.
I'm not even advocating for them to be more Eververse stuff, but I think they put too much time into selling armor. When if they wanted to make money, really, they should just make more weapon ornaments.
Yeah.
Or exotic weapon ornaments.
That you actually see. Yeah, I agree.
Yes, but also because this is gonna. I mean, they're not gonna fucking listen to this. You can get cool shit in the raid.
Right.
Or cool armor in the raid. Like, I'm content. I don't see Eververse armor and think, damn, like, some of it's cool, but I don't want to spend 20 quid on it. However, I'm more likely to spend 10 quid, $10 on an ornament for the gun I use all the time. Right. Where I get bored of my armor set and I change it every now and again. Sorry, that was a very long tangent.
No, it's fine. This is all fine. Like and I'm not disagreeing with you on like any of this stuff.
No,
like,
no. But I think but if you're coming back to the game, you know you're going to be spending time on it. You know you're going to be like, I want to look cool while I do this shit. I want to make my Guardian look cool, so I'm going to spend money.
Sure.
Whereas if like I've played live service games. And I knew I wasn't going to play them for very long, if you know what I mean. Like, I tried out... what was that game that Ubisoft did recently that's like COD?
Oh, the one that, like, no one plays?
I've forgotten the name of it now.
Yeah, that's how, memorable it is.
Bollocks. All right, I remember another game. I played the finals for, like, a week.
Sure.
Right? I didn't spend money on it. I didn't buy the season pass. I mean, it's a free game. I was trying it out. Because I knew I wasn't going to play it long term. If I start playing a game long enough, I'm like, oh, I might spend money on it because I've been playing it for that long. I've invested time in it. And then and then some people even be like, oh, well, the game's free. There's the psychology behind it of, I'll drop a bit of money on it here because the game's free, you know? I got it for free. It's the same on Overwatch. I know I play that game. I know I'm going to probably play it, you know, in the next few months. I've played it for this long. I'm attached to these characters. I'll spend money on it. Whereas if I knew I was only going to play it for a few months at most in my life, I'm not going to spend money on it because it's like an investment. All right, you get whales who just buy everything because they're insane, or they're like oil rig owners and they don't care. Or they're a Saudi prince. But it's the psychological part of I'm invested time in this game. I'm going to be playing it a lot because I enjoy it and there's stuff to do. Versus I've done everything. There's nothing more to do. You know, and that's why they time gate stuff as well, like the seasonal stuff, because it gets people to come back next week. They know they're going to be playing it next week, the week after that. They're going to spend money on it because they're actively doing stuff in the game. Whereas if they literally made it so you could do everything immediately, like, I don't mean, obviously, because RNG is a thing, and you could still, even if you could grind it out in a week and continuously play it for an infinite amount of times for drops of, say, Vex Mythic class, obviously doesn't mean you get it that week. But there's even a chance that people can, that makes it so that there's more of a chance, even if it's a small bit, more of a chance that that person will not stay around long term. So,
and that's less incentive. That might be. I'm just like, ultimately what I'm coming down to, and this is the last thing I'll say. We should probably just move on. And you're welcome to give a rebuttal or something. It's just like it's fine.
I don't disagree. No, I'm not angry.
I know. It's really shitty to play something for several weeks when you see other people getting it, other people making cool builds with it, and then it's like, clearly this is a season where we're meant to have some kind of synergy with stasis, and here they make an exotic that has synergy with stasis, and it's like, I would like to play with that weapon and do things with it and try out harder content with it and see how it does for bossing, because it's an iconic weapon. Yeah. And to have to wait several weeks and me not have any agency over that is a really shitty feeling, and I'm tired of that when I've been basically now, like, had this kind of like, oh, I was able to grind uber bosses and I finally got that Shaco, and that elevated my build to a new level. Now let's see what I can do with it. And that's the stark contrast. And I'm just saying, I've gotten this other taste of what it's like to be able to farm content as much as
He's been let out the basement.
What's that?
I said you've been let out the basement.
Yeah, basically. Like, I've been given the opportunity to see what it's like of, I have the agency to grind as much as I want, and now my build is completely so much better because I got the Shaco, and it's like, let me, like, you make this cool, exciting thing and then put it behind an arbitrary RNG wall. That sucks, and it's just like, I was reminded of it, like, when the dungeon came out, and it's like, man, they put Icebreaker behind that. Like, I'm reminded of how terrible Buried Bloodlines felt to grind for, where it's like by the time I got it, I didn't even want it anymore because it was so like months had gone by before I finally got it, and it was like the excitement and pizzazz of being able to use it in builds was kind of like gone. And like and that's what happened with Euphony. By the time I finally got it, I was like not interested because like months had gone by in the season before I was able to get it. And now I'm like, and maybe I'll get lucky. Maybe the next vest where I complete, I'll get it, and that'll be cool. But I would like to be able to have some agency over how much I would want to grind for it. And you're probably right that there's probably a breaking point, an average number of players that the moment they get something, they're just going to stop playing. I feel like those players are going to do that anyway. And those people are always going to just be I'm going to play the beginning of the season, and then I'll come back in 3 months. Like, and then there's the people like me that like to do all the triumphs, and I'm going to get the title, so I have to log in every week anyway. Whether or not I get Icebreaker now or later doesn't change me wanting to get the title. It would just be fun to play with the new toy early on rather than have to wait months to get it. I knew that the stupid you have to level up Rahul before you can get access to the new exotic armor pieces. And so I hoarded a shit ton of exotic engrams so that I could unlock it on the first day so that I could start playing with it. I didn't immediately go, cool, I unlocked it, and I turned the game off. No, I started making builds with it and playing around with it. Like, I don't really subscribe to this idea that, like, those people are fucking losers anyway. I'm just going to say it. Like, if you just want to get the gun so you don't have to play the game anymore, why do you play video games? Like, that's such a
is insane.
Weird concept to me.
That is weird. Like, yeah, I don't.
So that's the end of my rant. It's just like that's like the one thing that's like holding out that I really wish they would just get away from. Because you're probably right. I don't disagree that there is some psychology behind it, but it really is like, it's such an annoying thing of every time there's a new raid or a new dungeon, there's this dread that comes over me because it's funny you mentioned Vow of the Disciple. That's the only raid that I've done where I got the exotic on the first drop. Every other one I've had to put in several months to get, and it's such a bad feeling.
That was probably my unluckiest raid drop.
Yeah,
was Vow, but like it was the weird. Unfortunately for you, it's also like the weirdest fucking raid exotic that they've done.
Yeah, and like Vogue was probably one of the worst for me, where I was in like the upper 50s before. I was like 57 or something.
All right, I didn't get Taraba from Crown, but I only did Crown like
same with me. I only did that like 3 or 4 times. I didn't like that
7
raid.
Times max. Yeah. And that was the only one I bought with the raid. The tokens from the kiosk. But yeah, no, there are they should have a system eventually where. Wait, have they changed the thing where you get more chance if you haven't got it?
Oh yeah, the triumphs and stuff that you can get, but it's such an arbitrary. You don't know if it's actually better or like. It's just like
you don't know the percentage chance. So it
doesn't change the fact of, oh, here it is, Tuesday night reset. We got the boss checkpoint. I did my 3 runs. Well, now I didn't get Icebreaker this week. Well, that feels really bad.
It's more anecdotal, but I mean, it's a fucking different game. But when I tried the first Ascendant, fuck me, that game is weird now. There was a component I needed to craft a character to play as, right? And you had to do this mission that was essentially a strike, but it was very shit.
Right.
The dialogue in it was cringe, and it was awful, and the voice acting was very bad. And it told you the drop chances of the different items you could get in the mission.
That's cool.
And it said 20%. There's also a rarer drop that's 8%. I cleared that mission. It takes average about 15 minutes to do, more if depending on the people you're with don't know how to fight the boss, which isn't. It's not hard. It's just people don't shoot them, if that makes sense. I think I had to do it about 55 times before I got the 20% chance thing. I got the 8% chance thing 4 times.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Before, right. However, the company who made the game Nexon are known for their scummy practices. The rarer thing was not for a character, it's for a weapon.
Right.
You can't buy those. However, characters you can buy, right? You can just flat out buy the characters if you don't want to grind for them, because that's how they make their money. It's a free-to-play game. So people think, or I don't know if this is true or not, because I don't really play the game, that the 20% chance for the character items are actually rarer than the 8, and the 20 is just a lie. Because this isn't just me, this is just like an overall thing.
Sure.
And that they're flipped, or whatever. Because you can buy the character if you're impatient, or so it's trying to get you to pay for the character. So it was lying, the percent chance, supposedly. I don't know how true that was, of the drop. Now I would be interested to see if they added a percent chance for the exotic into a raid or dungeon, and to see what the number would actually be like.
Right.
And then what the triumphs did to that.
Yeah.
However, it would then, I think, I don't know, there would be pros and cons, because then people would see a number and be like, that's not real. I don't know, like as I've just explained.
And ultimately, it's still a percentage, and that's the same problem that Diablo has, where it's like supposedly a 2 or 3% chance, but it's like it feels, at the end of the day, it feels like either you get it to drop or you don't, and it feels bad because people are like, I've done 100 Durials and haven't gotten a single mythic to drop, and other people are like, I got 3 to drop on one run, and that's like, it doesn't change the fact that it's like a shitty feeling, and RNG is RNG.
Yeah,
and I think what we're all trying to say here is Divinity is the best one because it had a quest associated with it.
No, someone suggested in the clan doing a div run the other day.
Oh god. Oh Jesus.
I like Garden. I just can't be bothered.
We didn't even talk about red borders are now available for Garden, but like literally no one in my clan is like at all remotely interested in.
Everyone's scared of playing jump rope in Garden. That's why.
Yeah. Don't remind me.
All right, gentlemen. For the sake of my sanity, when I go to edit this episode,
sorry.
No, that's okay. This has been wonderful content. I hope our audience is enjoying it as much as I am. But it is
poor Luke working, listen to me talk about the psychology of Bungie being a slightly bit shitty.
I am gonna cut it off here. We'll save Destiny Rising for later, just so we have a digestible episode that I can put out in a timely manner. No, this is fantastic. This is why I hired you guys in the first place. This is perfect. But anyways,
we're getting paid.
Yeah. I was gonna say that.
This is why I recruited you.
We get paid in RNG, and I've been siphoning off it all. Sorry, Rob.
No, it's fine.
All right, so thank you guys for hopping on and chatting. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for out there for listening. We'll talk Destiny Rising next time. We'll also talk Vespers Host, because I really want to get into that, because I really love Vespers.
Yes.
But anyways, thank you guys for listening. As always, whether you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, whatever, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, whatever. Join us on Twitch when we're live, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
You can put this voice recording away and go on with your life, because you and I both know